Okay, welcome back to SolidWorks, and today what we're going to take a look at is the concept of an assembly drawing. And so assemblies are created from combining individual parts, and the feature that we're going to focus in on today is the mating feature. So what we need first is to create a simple part that we can use in our assembly. So let's begin by creating a new part, selecting File, New. And what we'll do is create a simple L block, and so we can start by working on the right plane. Let's go normal 2, selecting extruded boss base. And let's select the line command, and let's rough out an L shape block. And we'll smart dimension it. Let's specify the base as 2 inches. Height is 2 inches. Let's make this 1. And now we have a fully defined profile. Let's exit our sketch. And then let's set our blind to 2 inches. Green check, and so we have our L-shaped block that we're going to use in our assembly. Now before we can use an assembly, we actually have to save our part. So let's do that next. We'll say File, Save As, and I'm going to call this Mate Block. And now we're ready to begin our assembly. So going up to our top drop-down menu, we're now going to select the final option in the list, which is Make Assembly from Part. Left clicking on that. We're brought to our Import Parts menu, and so here we can browse and select the parts that we need. So since we just have that one part which is already open, it's by default. But let's say I need to browse and select a particular part. I can double click on that and then left click my mouse in my workspace and the part will appear. I'm going to need to bring in a second part, and so looking across the top we have some options. One is to insert a component. So if I left click, notice I'm back to the same menu. This time what I can do is simply double click, or actually drag in rather, with the mouse, left clicking and positioning, and then left clicking again and bringing in a second part. And you would repeat that procedure as all of the necessary parts are brought into the assembly. If you look at your features tree, notice you have your two parts, block 1, block 2. One has F in parentheses, one has a minus sign in parentheses. The F indicates that this part is fixed, whereas the minus sign indicates that this part is floating. And so by default, the first part that comes into your assembly is fixed, and all that means is if I were to left click and try to move this guy, I cannot. So I'm told component is fixed, will not move. Likewise, if I were to take my floating part, left click on it, notice I can simply drag it to a new position, and that is exactly the same that is being done with the move command. So if I take a move, I can left click and reposition this part. There's also a rotate command where we can rotate it to any position that we want. Alright, and that's only possible when your part is in the floating option. Looking at move, notice we do have some additional options. So we have free drag, which is what we were just doing, about an object, or by specifying a delta XYZ. If we wanted to go back to move, and this time do a simple move component, We have additional ones, so we can set to an XYZ position. We can move along XYZ axis. So notice we're now moving along just the Y-axis, along the Z-axis, etc. If I were to toggle back to free, we have collision detection, and we could actually stop the part when they do collide. So this is very good for checking for interference. So notice that's as far as we could actually drag that part. Without that checked, of course, my parts can combine. So with the move feature, you're going to be positioning your your individual parts in your assembly, and what we need to demonstrate next is how we actually combine them. We combine them by using the mate feature. And so to combine these two parts, what I would do is left-click mate, and we have some options. We have coincident, parallel, perpendicular, tangent, concentric. We could even specify a distance as well as an angle. There are advanced mates that we can take a look at where you can specify a range for a distance, a maximum and a minimum, and you can take a look at those in the future. What we want to do is a simple coincident mate, and what that means is we're going to take 2 points on the part and we're going to connect them. So for instance, if I wanted to take this point and bring them together with the mate, I'm going to left click first. First point shows up in my mate selections. Left click again, and now those 2 points are coincident. I get a little menu that pops up that says I can finish the mate. I can undo if I wanted to. We have the distance specified, or we have lock two components together feature. If I were to click the green check, notice I could actually pick this part up and move it, but the coincident points are locked. Now if I wanted to join this together, what I can do is specify an additional mate. So if I were to make this point and this point coincident, notice that the parts are starting to come together, but not quite. And so what I can do is specify 2 additional points, and that would finish this particular mate. So now those parts are perfectly aligned as one. And if I were to finish with the green check and now pick this part up to move, notice both of them are connected. Some other options with mate, if I were to undo and go back, you can try a couple of other ones. So for instance, if I were to select parallel, maybe I want to make this surface and this surface parallel, and you can see that the block turns. And you could add additional mates. So for instance, maybe we want to specify an angle. Maybe 45 degrees. And you can play around with some of these other standard mate features. Right, so, once your components are mated, what you can then do is work with some of the other features that are available. We have linear component. So if we wanted to take a piece of the assembly and make a pattern copy, we can. Linear, circular, feature-driven component pattern, or even mirror. When things are brought together, we can use SOLIDWORKS standard library of hardware to create or show fasteners, how things are connected. We can show hide components, and that allows you to declutter your drawing. If we have lots of mates pieces of the assembly. Might be hard to work around things. We have additional features, so as we're putting this together, we can do things like create simple holes, use the hole wizard, fillet, chamfer. Reference geometry, again, we might need to mate relative to a plane that is not part of our particular drawing. Additional features that we're going to take a look at shortly would be motion study, adding a bill of materials, and exploded view. So this will conclude just a brief introduction of mating, and what we want to do next is to take a look at exploded view, and we will mate 2 additional parts for that.